What's up, everybody? I'm Jason C. at the Mash and Drum Whiskey Room. Welcome in today. The winners are in. The 2021 San Francisco Spirit Award winners have been announced. Like me, I would imagine a lot of you out there think whiskey awards are half fun and half bullshit. But more than any other awards here in the US, the San Francisco Spirit Awards always end up making a huge impact on the market that can drive up price and demand on some of our available favorites, quickly making them very unavailable. Today I'm going to talk about some of the winners, what I think is worth picking up, and also reviewing Blue Run Bourbon, which actually won pretty big in San Francisco right here on the Mash and Drum. Each year, the San Francisco World Spirits Competition receives over 1,000 whiskey entries to judge. This year, in 2021, it received 1,276 to be exact, which is just a crazy amount of whiskey. What I didn't know is that the competition is the second oldest in the world after only the International Wines and Spirits Competition, and the oldest and largest in the US. Now, its judges are considered world-class, and its medals and awards ranks among the world's prestigious, making the San Francisco Spirit Awards basically the Academy Awards of spirits competitions. It can give old favorites newfound appreciation and can put a big spotlight on unexplored spirits and newer distilleries trying to separate themselves from the pack. Like I mentioned before, I personally have a love-hate relationship with the San Francisco Awards, and it's not to the fault of them. Like I said, this is the second oldest spirits competition in the world. But in the world of whiskey today, where favorites like Henry McKenna, who won again, yeah, we're gonna get into that, all of a sudden disappear off the shelf and get jacked up in price, or hoarded by whiskey enthusiasts, or flipped at triple the price on secondary, you almost cringe and hope that your favorite bourbon avoids being awarded that double gold or best in category accolade. Now, the other half of me does appreciate the awards because of newer distilleries working their ass off and doing things the right way to make great whiskey. Now, getting an award and recognition at the San Francisco Awards can give a new unfounded distillery a huge boost and keeps that revenue coming in so they could keep innovating. So what I'm going to do is run through some of the more notable winners that I found to be really interesting, and also highlight Blue Run at the end. We'll do a full review of this one, which also, like I mentioned, won pretty big at the Spirits Awards competition. So my first winner I want to chat about, which is right here in my hometown of Columbus, Ohio, in the category of the Best American Blended Whiskey, went to High Bank for its Whiskey War Barrel Proof. This bottle in particular, it's a blended rye heavy mash bill. Now this consists of 95.5 rye from MGP, a 36 bourbon rye mash bill at MGP, and the 21% rye bourbon mash bill from MGP as well. Now these just hit the 4-year mark in terms of age, and are coming out at about 116.5 proof and higher. Now at the 2-year mark, when I first tried this was a great blend, had a lot of spice and a lot of citrus, great for cocktails, which I think they focused on in the beginning, and if you like spicy whiskeys, it was really great for sipping. But now that this has hit the 4-year mark, this is really starting to round out in flavor. The sweeter notes are coming more forward, more caramel, more vanilla. The orange citrus notes are now getting a bit candied, and that high spice, which is still there, has started rounding out, getting a bit more refined. Congrats to Adam Hines and the team at High Bank Distilling here in Columbus, Ohio for the well-deserved award. A great blend for you guys to check out. I will be doing a full review of the 4-year stuff coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. Now, the best straight bourbon went to Sazerac 1792 Bottled in Bond Kentucky Straight Bourbon. Now, this is 100 proof, distilled at the 1792 Barton Distillery, mash bill of 74 corn, 18% rye, and 8% barley. 1792 Bottled in Bond was released annually in the fall beginning in 2017 and retails for about 40 bucks if you could find it. Now, this happens to be a single barrel that I picked a while ago, and I really did, it was the first time I had ever tried 1792 Bottled in Bond. Unfortunately, it's really tough for find, especially in my area. You don't really see these bottle and bonds very often. They release sporadically, and whenever I seem to be looking for them, I can usually only really find the full proof or the small batch. This is actually what's in my glass right now. And there's a lot of rye spice, caramel, vanilla. 1792, you tend to get a little hint of banana in there, which is kind of typical of some Barton stuff. Now, while I think this is a really solid bourbon, as far as being awarded the best straight bourbon and is everything out there, you know, against everything that's out there, I don't know. I'm not sure I would probably agree with that. Now, again, I'm not a judge in this competition, but I will say the San Fran, historically, the San Fran Awards tend to award bourbons that don't exactly lean towards, you know, big proof, big spice, you know, big H statements. It seems they look for an overall elegant and refined whiskey. I could see this one doing that for them, but I will say besides the full proof, this is the 1792 offering I wish was more available. Next up was the best small batch bourbon 6 to 10 years old, which went to the Parker's Heritage Collection 14th edition, the 10-year heavy char. Frankly, I was really surprised by this one when I reviewed it last year, and it ended up being in my top 10 of 2020 overall, focusing on the utilization of a char at level 5 instead of the customary level 3 that Heaven Hill normally uses. So unlike the heavy char rye, that was the 2019 release, this was a 10-year, 120 proofer. This retails for about 120, 130 bucks and was already ridiculously hard to find. This was smoky, spicy, sweet, had deep, rich flavors that I was a huge fan of. The heavy char complements the great Heaven Hill flavors overall. Just a great pour. I'm gonna try a little bit here. It's so deep, dark, rich, a lot of chocolate, little cherry peeks out. Still get a little bit of that Heaven Hill nuttiness, the smoke element as well. Just a fantastic bourbon. Like I said, this is already super hard to find, but if you go to a bar or have a chance to try this one, it's very unique and delicious. Surprising pick, but I love this one. I'll leave a link to my full review of this one right here if you guys want to get a more in-depth review. Next up is the best special barrel finished bourbon, which went to Bardstown Bourbon Company's Chateau de la Baude bourbon. If you're wondering what the hell Chateau de la Baude is, it's an Armagnac producer in Gascony, France that goes back to the late 19th century. Bardstown sourced 12-year MGP and finished it in these Chateau de la Baude Armagnac casks for 18 months. This was 130 bucks at retail, 118.4 proof. I disagree with a lot of some of these awards that I see, but this one, I could not agree more. This was easily the best finished bourbon I tried last year and was number 3 in my top 10 overall for 2020. This has so much freaking depth. Espresso, chocolate, honey, orange. It's floral, it's rich. Unfortunately, this thing is freaking gone. You see them on secondary here and there for $400 plus, but this was already that high before it even won this award. And that's really due to the MGP 12-year-old bourbon in this bottle that's finished. A lot of people will pay an absolute premium for anything high-aged MGP, especially now that we know those high-aged MGP barrels and picks are gonna start going away here. The well has run dry a little bit. This has become a much more premium type of find. Now I'm hoping we see this again from Bardstown Bourbon Company this year. It's an absolute hitter. Again, not sure if MGP will be in the next one. We'll see what happens, what they're gonna finish, and hopefully using these Armagnac casks. But as far as a finished bourbon overall winning an award, I could not agree more with this selection. I think San Francisco nailed this one. The best single barrel bourbon up to 10 years is Henry McKenna's single barrel. I'm serious, it won again. Now it won Best Whiskey of the Year at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition in 2019, and at that time was only the second time that a bourbon had taken the Best in Show award for whiskey in the competition's nearly 2 decades of operation. It's nuts. Now, of course, we all know what happened after that. The once available $30 Darling bottle on the shelf disappeared off those shelves We all stocked up. Heaven Hill raised the MSRP to 50 bucks. And even though it's still a $50 MSRP, you see these at stores jacked up to $80 and higher. There may not be more of a prime example of a bourbon that makes people hate these awards. Now, being a single barrel, most of us don't know or will ever taste that particular single barrel that Heaven Hill entered, for their Henry McKenna selection. But even at 50 bucks, it's still it's a damn solid bourbon. But I still don't see how this beats out some other really popular single barrels. I mean, you never know. Maybe what they entered is a really magical single barrel. Who knows? But it's crazy to me that this thing won again. It's the Michael Jordan of bourbons. It always finds a way to win. And finally, this brings us to today's review for Blue Run Spirits, who cleaned up at the awards, winning Best Small Batch Bourbon in the 11 years and older category, which is actually a 14-year-old bourbon, and also took top honors for the Best Single Barrel Bourbon, 11 years and older, with a 13.5 single barrel bourbon that I don't even think I've seen on the market yet. Blue Run Spirits was started in 2019 by a group of friends and bourbon lovers, a Nike designer, Facebook's first director-level employee, a hospitality executive, a political advisor, and a philanthropist. They wanted to evolve the bourbon industry, creating fine products for the modern whiskey fan. They partnered up with the legendary Jim Rutledge, a 50-plus year whiskey veteran and former master distiller at Four Roses, who serves as what they refer to as the brand's liquid director. I feel like I could be a liquid director. Just direct that stuff right down the hatch. That's all you need to do. Rinse, repeat, done. Liquid direction. So the bottle was designed by Devin McKinney, the creative mind behind some of the world's most sought after Nike sneakers. The bottles are hand numbered, featuring the brand's signature gold butterfly medallion, which symbolizes the metamorphosis of the bourbon industry as it reaches a broader audience, which appreciates fine bourbon through Blue Run. That's a nice story, I guess. This is the inaugural small batch release, which had a run of only 2,600 bottles. It contains bourbon sourced from an undisclosed distillery in Kentucky, and the company notes future releases will also be selected, distilled, and blended by Jim Rutledge, just like this one. So first things first, guys, we've seen a lot of 13-year bourbons coming out, in the last, couple years. And give that a pour. Brands like Calumet, Sam Houston, Buckner's 13-year-old single barrel, and even Cream of Kentucky, which is Jim Rutledge's other passion project, with similar age statements to what we are seeing out of Blue Run. So I would bet my pretty little butterfly here that we are looking at some more Barton source distillate here as well. This is 113 proof, which isn't barrel proof. It's 13 years old and retails for about 170 bucks. Let's give it a go. So I borrowed this bottle from my buddy Dustin. He let me borrow this one. I was waiting for like a good time to review this one, and I figured why not now, considering it, did this label, this brand did very well at the awards. Very rich caramel and vanilla, very traditional bourbon notes coming through on the nose. Definitely get a little bit of that rye spice. Getting some nice sweet oak on there. There's a hint of like a bright stone fruit, maybe pear, apricot coming through as well. It's got a very balanced nose, something I would expect from Jim Rutledge. It's actually kind of Four Rosy a little bit. Reminds me a little bit of some Four Roses picks I've had. Yeah, maybe a hint of white chocolate as well. Very caramel, very vanilla, little fruit forward as I mentioned. It's a very nice nose. There's nothing like jumping out of the glass that's saying wow, but at the same time, it's very, again, go back to that word like elegant. It's very balanced. Let's go for a try on the palate. Here we go. Cheers. The sweetness factor is way more elevated on the palate than I was getting on the nose. A lot of the caramel, now some little bit more like brown sugar, a little bit molasses came through. A lot of sweetness, some like powdered sugar, but not overly sweet. Again, this kind of stays in that very light caramel. Think of creme brulee, that sugar candy shell that's right on top that you got to crack through to get to that really velvety vanilla note. A little bit of fruit there. Let's go for another sip. Again, another reason why I'm thinking it's Barton. It's really got some really, nice spice on the back end. Again, balancing that sweet and spicy together. But again, it's not, there's nothing pushing one way or the other. It's just a very beautifully balanced bourbon, as I thought I would expect. Maybe not to the level that this one is bringing it, but let's go for another sip. Oh, that vanilla cream just keeps coming. Little drizzle of caramel. You get a nice little punch of oak on the very back end. A little bit of oak spice. There's nothing drying or off-putting about it. It finishes nicely, has a great balance of spice. Let's take another sip and talk about the finish here. So again, I'm getting some of those stone fruits in the back end. Maybe it's becoming a little darker. It might be turning into a little bit of cherry. But on the back end, I'm starting to get some of those, the apricot, pear, maybe a slight cherry note there as well to kind of go along with that. Really, there's a really beautiful black pepper and a long finish here that just lingers. You don't feel it as much going down, you know, down your, you know, that Kentucky hug area, as you do just like just sitting here on the back of your palate, which is pretty remarkable considering I'm expecting it to affect me going all the way down. It's just kind of sitting here like that peppery spice, just lingering like really like high carbonated soda, or like a like black pepper, just like lingering on and on. One more sip of this one. It's good. I think the pepperiness and that, you know, that almost like effervescence that it gives on the back end of it, it definitely reminds me a little bit of the Cream of Kentucky release that Jim Rutledge did a little bit, that effervescence of it. It's a tad drying on the back end, but I don't really think it's enough to be, you know, called out as affecting much. But again, I think this bourbon, while I don't think it's, again, just like I mentioned earlier with what San Francisco likes to pick, it doesn't really lean too far one way or the other. This reminds me of some of the Four Roses, the OESKs or the OBSKs, maybe not as spicy, but when you've ever had one of those selections from Four Roses and they're just in perfect balance, this reminds me of that, which makes sense coming from Jim Rutledge's background. It's very sweet on the front. It's got a lot of spice in the back end. There's a really nice mix of caramel, vanilla, traditional notes. You mix that up with some of that sweet, spicy, a little bit of oak spice. Some fruits work their way in the form of like pear, apricot, a little bit of dark cherry on the back end. And I think you just have you don't have anything that's gonna punch you in the face one way or the other. This is a very elegant, well-crafted bourbon, which is what I think San Francisco usually likes to pick. Now, for you out there watching, is this worth the $170 price point? For me, I don't think so. I would like to see this at maybe 120, 130, that 13-year mark, to compete with the other brands like Sam Houston 14, also the Calumet 15, which just came out. I'll have a review for that one coming soon. It's actually really delicious bourbon. Again, you have the Cream of Kentucky, which is also a product from Jim Rutledge, and a bunch of others. And then you have Bardstown Bourbon Company, who is also using some Barton distillate into their Discovery series in some blends for that $130 price point. Now, if you're a fan of the Four Roses selections, this, I think you will absolutely love this. I think this is a delicious bourbon. I love the balance of it. I think it's sweet, it's spicy, it's got everything that I look for in a bourbon. Just the price point on this is killing me, especially with all those Barton entries that I mentioned earlier. Again, like the Sam Houstons and the Calumets. The Cream of Kentucky is even cheaper than this, which is also Jim Rutledge's other, you know, passion project. So, you know, don't go crazy for this one. I know it won the awards, but all in all, there are other options out there if you want the Barton distillate. It may not be blended as elegantly as Jim Rutledge is able to do it, but there are other options out there without dropping $170 for this. All right, guys, we'll hope you enjoyed this video as we look through the 2021 San Francisco Spirit Awards winners, and also one of the big winners here, which was the Blue Run. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments what you think of the award winners, if you agree with any of them, if you really disagree with any of them. I know a lot of you guys out there probably have some pointed comments at some of the selections. And as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share it with. So cheers, and I'll see you next time here on The Mash and Drum. Take care, everybody.